The morning of my wedding was supposed to be perfect. Instead, it began with a secret hidden inside a white garment bag. I still remember the way the sunlight spilled through the hotel suite windows that Saturday morning, turning everything gold. My bridesmaids moved around the room, carrying makeup brushes, coffee cups, and bouquets wrapped in ribbon. Laughter drifted through the air. Someone had turned on soft music. Everything felt exactly the way I had imagined it would. For nearly a year, Ryan and I had planned every detail of our wedding. Every flower arrangement, every table setting, every song. It wasn't about creating a perfect event. It was about celebrating the life we were building together. At least, that's what I believed. My wedding dress hung inside a protective garment bag near the window. It was simple, elegant, and timeless. The kind of dress I had dreamed about since I was a little girl. I had chosen it 6 months earlier after visiting countless bridal shops across 3 states. The moment I found it, I knew. That dress felt like me. Around 10 o'clock, my maid of honor Lauren smiled and pointed toward it. "Time to get dressed," she said. My stomach fluttered with nervous excitement. I walked over and carefully unzipped the garment bag. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. My eyes moved across the fabric slowly. Then my breath stopped. A section of delicate lace near the front had been damaged. The intricate pattern that had once looked flawless now appeared uneven and distorted. The damage wasn't large, but it was impossible to ignore. My hands froze against the fabric. The room went silent. Lauren stepped beside me. Her smile vanished instantly. One by one, the other bridesmaids gathered around. Nobody spoke. Nobody knew what to say. I stared at the dress for several seconds, then several more. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear anything else. Maybe it happened during shipping, one bridesmaid finally offered. Another suggested it could have been damaged by accident during transport from the bridal boutique. I wanted to believe them. I really did. But something felt wrong. The dress had been inspected just 3 days earlier. I had personally looked it over. Every bead, every seam, every piece of lace. It had been perfect. Lauren gently touched my arm. "Claire, we'll figure this out." I nodded slowly. Somehow, tears never came. Maybe I was too shocked. Maybe I was too determined not to let anyone ruin my day. Or maybe something deep inside me already suspected this wasn't an accident. Less than an hour later, I found myself standing in front of a mirror wearing a backup gown borrowed from the bridal boutique. It looked nice. Everyone kept telling me that. But it wasn't my dress. It wasn't the dress I'd imagined walking down the aisle in. As guests arrived downstairs, I forced a smile and focused on moving forward. The ceremony had to happen. Ryan was waiting. Family members filled the venue. Music played. Cameras flashed. Yet throughout the entire afternoon, a strange feeling stayed with me. Every time I looked across the room, I noticed my future mother-in-law, Diane. She seemed unusually attentive, unusually concerned. She kept asking if I was okay. She kept mentioning how unfortunate the situation was. Each comment sounded perfectly polite, perfectly reasonable, but something about her expression lingered in my mind. It was subtle, barely noticeable, a look that appeared for only a second before disappearing again. At the time, I convinced myself I was imagining things. Weddings are emotional. Stress makes people see things that aren't there. That's what I told myself. I smiled for photographs. I greeted relatives. I danced with Ryan. I tried to enjoy every moment. Yet that damaged dress never left my thoughts. Later that night, after most of the guests had gone home and the celebration was winding down, Lauren approached me holding her phone. Her face had gone pale. "Claire," she said quietly, "I think you need to see something." I took the phone from her hands. One photograph, one timestamp, one tiny detail hidden in the background. In that moment, I realized the damage to my wedding dress was only the beginning, and the truth waiting behind it would shock our entire family. For several seconds, I could not take my eyes off the photograph on Lauren's phone. It had been taken by one of the bridesmaids earlier that morning while everyone was getting ready. At first glance, it looked completely ordinary. Women carrying garment bags, makeup artists moving between rooms, people smiling. But in the far corner of the image, partially reflected in a decorative mirror, was Diane. The timestamp showed it had been taken less than 20 minutes before I discovered the damage to my dress. What made my stomach tighten was not simply that she was there. Family members had been moving throughout the venue all morning. It was where she was standing. The bridal suite had been reserved for me and my bridesmaids. Guests had no reason to be there. especially not near the private dressing area where my gown had been hanging. Lauren zoomed in. Diane appeared to be looking directly toward the garment bag. Her expression was impossible to read, but the image planted a seed in my mind that refused to disappear. I sat down slowly and stared at the screen again. "Maybe it means nothing," Lauren said carefully. "Maybe she was just passing by." I nodded, but something inside me disagreed. As the evening came to an end and Ryan and I finally returned to our hotel suite, exhaustion settled over me. The wedding had been beautiful despite everything. Ryan had been wonderful all day. The ceremony had gone smoothly. The guests seemed happy. Yet every time I closed my eyes, I saw that photograph. Ryan noticed my silence almost immediately. "You were still thinking about the dress, aren't you?" he asked. I looked at him for a moment before answering. "Do you think your mother was in the bridal suite this morning?" His forehead creased with confusion. "My mother? Why would she be there?" I showed him the image. He studied it for several seconds. Then he shrugged. "Honestly, Claire, it could be anything. Mom likes to check on everything during family events." His answer was reasonable. Diane had always been heavily involved in family gatherings. She organized holiday dinners, planned birthday parties, coordinated reunions. Everyone described her as helpful, thoughtful, dedicated. Yet as Ryan spoke, memories began surfacing one after another. Small moments I had, ignored for years. The time Diane quietly changed the restaurant reservation for my birthday because she preferred a different location. The time she convinced Ryan to cancel a weekend trip we had planned because she suddenly needed help organizing her garage. The countless occasions when she inserted herself into decisions that did not belong to her. None of those incidents seemed serious on their own. Together, however, they painted a picture I had never fully examined. Diane always needed control. She always needed to be at the center of important moments. The next morning, while Ryan slept, I opened my phone and began scrolling through old messages, photographs, and memories. The more I looked, the more uncomfortable I became. A pattern emerged. Every major milestone in our relationship seemed to contain Diane's fingerprints somewhere in the background. Subtle, easy to miss, yet impossible to ignore once seen. By noon, I was no longer asking whether the damage to my dress had been accidental. I was asking a different question entirely. If Diane had been willing to interfere on the most important day of my life, what else had she been hiding all these years? The following week should have been filled with honeymoon photos and thank you notes, but instead I found myself replaying years of memories through a completely different lens. Once a question enters your mind, it changes everything. You start noticing details that never seemed important before. You remember conversations you dismissed. You revisit moments you explained away because trusting people feels easier than questioning them. Ryan returned to work on Monday, and I spent most of the day organizing wedding photos. Hundreds of images filled my laptop screen. Smiling faces, family hugs, toasts, dancing. On the surface, everything looked perfect, yet my attention kept drifting toward Diane. In photo after photo, she was there, watching, directing, positioning herself at the center of every important moment. By late afternoon, I had opened an old folder containing pictures from the first year Ryan and I dated. The same pattern appeared. Diane standing between us at family gatherings. Diane deciding where everyone sat during holidays. Diane speaking for Ryan before he had a chance to answer simple questions himself. At the time, I had interpreted her behavior as enthusiasm. Now I was not so sure. 2 days later, Lauren called me. Her voice sounded unusually serious. I think I found something else. We met at a small coffee shop about 15 minutes from my apartment. She arrived carrying her tablet and immediately slid into the booth across from me. Without saying a word, she opened a document. It was the event schedule from the wedding venue. Every vendor arrival, every delivery, every room assignment. Lauren pointed toward a section highlighted in yellow. "Look at the access list for the bridal suite." I leaned closer. According to the venue records, only 6 people had been approved to enter that area during the morning preparations. My name was on the list. Lauren's name was there. The photographer, the makeup team, the wedding coordinator, and one additional name, Diane Bennett. I stared at the screen. Why would she have access? Lauren shook her head. I asked the coordinator. She said Diane personally requested it months ago. She told them she needed access because she was helping manage wedding logistics. The explanation sounded harmless. Reasonable, even. Yet nobody had ever mentioned it to me. Not once. An uncomfortable silence settled between us. I wrapped both hands around my coffee cup. It had already gone cold. "Maybe this still proves nothing," I said quietly. Lauren looked unconvinced. "Maybe, but there is something else." She opened another file. This time it was a message from the wedding coordinator. According to the timeline, Diane had entered the bridal suite that morning while the room was temporarily empty. Most of the bridesmaids had been downstairs. I had been meeting with the photographer. The coordinator had stepped away to deal with a delivery issue. For approximately 12 minutes, Diane had been alone near the preparation area. 12 minutes. Not a long time, yet long enough for countless possibilities. Long enough to make my pulse quicken. Long enough to erase any remaining comfort I had been clinging to. As I drove home, later that afternoon, another thought entered my mind. If Diane had been quietly controlling situations for years, she would not have started with my wedding dress. People do not suddenly become manipulative overnight. They practice, they refine, they build habits over time. And for the first time since the wedding, I began to wonder whether the damaged dress was not the real story at all. Perhaps it was merely the first clue leading towards something much bigger. That evening I sat alone at my kitchen table while the sun disappeared beyond the trees outside our apartment complex. Ryan was working late, and for the first time in weeks, I welcomed the silence. My laptop sat open in front of me. Beside it rested a yellow legal pad filled with notes, dates, and questions. The list had started small. Now it covered 3 pages. I was no longer looking at a single incident. I was looking at a pattern. The more I examined the past, the more difficult it became to ignore. Around 8 o'clock, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Olivia, Ryan's younger sister, and, unlike Diane, someone who rarely involved herself in family drama. Her voice sounded hesitant. "Claire, do you have a minute?" I immediately sensed something unusual. Olivia was normally direct, confident. Tonight she sounded nervous. I told her I was free, and after a brief pause she asked a question that caught me completely off guard. "Have you ever felt like Mom tries to control everything around Ryan?" I leaned back in my chair. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then I answered honestly. "Recently, yes." Another silence followed. Olivia exhaled slowly. I thought I was the only one who noticed. That conversation lasted nearly 2 hours. By the time it ended, I felt as though an entirely new version of the family had been revealed. Olivia began sharing stories from years earlier. Small incidents, quiet manipulations, situations that seemed insignificant individually but disturbing when viewed together. She told me about college decisions Diane had influenced without anyone realizing. Friendships she quietly discouraged. Relationships she subtly criticized until they disappeared. According to Olivia, Diane rarely gave direct orders. She preferred suggestions, concerns, questions designed to steer people toward the outcome she wanted. "Everyone thinks she is helping," Olivia said. "That is why nobody sees it happening." I wrote notes as she spoke. Dates, names, details. Then Olivia mentioned something that made me stop writing altogether. A few months before Ryan proposed, Diane had arranged a lunch with one of his former girlfriends. Apparently, she had never approved of Ryan's relationship with me and believed he should reconnect with someone from his past. The meeting had never gone anywhere. Ryan never mentioned it because he considered it awkward and unimportant. But I could not stop thinking about it. Why had Diane been involved at all? Why would she attempt to influence a grown man's personal relationship? After the call ended, I sat quietly for a long time. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Somewhere in the distance, a siren echoed through the city before fading away. I stared at the pages of notes spread across the table. Every answer seemed to create 2 new questions. Then my phone vibrated again. A new message appeared from Lauren. Attached was an image. "You need to see this," she wrote. My pulse quickened as I opened the file. It was a screenshot from the venue security office. Not a video, not definitive proof. Just a log showing electronic door access records from the wedding morning. Most entries looked normal. Vendors, staff, bridal party members. Then one line caught my attention immediately. Diane's access badge had been used near the bridal suite not once, but 3 separate times before the ceremony. I stared at the screen as the reality settled over me. Whatever had happened that morning, Diane had been much closer to it than anyone originally believed. And for the first time, I began to suspect that someone else inside the family already knew the truth. The next few days passed in a strange haze. I went through the motions of normal life. but my mind remained fixed on the growing collection of facts scattered across my kitchen table. Every new piece of information seemed small by itself. Together, they formed something impossible to ignore. On Thursday afternoon, Olivia called again. This time her voice carried a sense of urgency. She asked if we could meet in person. An hour later, we were sitting in a quiet corner of a bookstore cafe across town. She arrived carrying a worn manila folder that looked as though it had been sitting in a drawer for years. After exchanging a few nervous pleasantries, she slid the folder across the table. "I found these while cleaning out some boxes from Dad's office," she said. Inside were old family documents, handwritten notes, event plans, and dozens of printed emails. Most appeared harmless. Then I noticed a familiar pattern. Diane's name surfaced again and again. Birthday parties, graduation celebrations, holiday gatherings, family vacations. In nearly every situation, she had quietly altered plans behind the scenes while presenting the changes as if they had happened naturally. Olivia pointed to one email exchange from several years earlier. Diane had contacted a venue manager before a family reunion and requested changes without informing anyone else. Another document showed her rearranging seating assignments at a cousin's wedding after the bride had already approved the final layout. None of it was dramatic. None of it seemed malicious on the surface. Yet each example revealed the same thing. Diane believed she should control outcomes, even when those decisions belonged to other people. As I turned another page, a folded note slipped onto the table. Olivia immediately recognized the handwriting. It belonged to her late father. The message was short, only a few sentences, yet it stopped both of us cold. In the note, he mentioned Diane's tendency to interfere in situations she could not control. He described it as a habit that had created tension within the family for years. Reading those words felt surreal. Someone else had noticed. Someone who knew her better than any of us. Someone who had quietly documented it long before my wedding. Later that evening, I returned home and reviewed everything again. Around 9 o'clock, Lauren sent another message. She had finally received a response from the venue's security contractor regarding the missing footage. Most of the recordings from the wedding morning had already been overwritten by the system. However, one technician had recovered a still image from a backup server. My hands tightened around the phone as I opened the attachment. The image quality was poor, grainy, distant, yet it clearly showed the hallway outside the bridal suite. A timestamp appeared in the corner. Standing near the entrance was Diane. She was not passing through. She was waiting. More importantly, she was not alone. Another person stood beside her, partially obscured by the camera angle. The face was difficult to identify, but the figure seemed familiar. I enlarged the image several times, studying every detail. The posture, the clothing, the hairstyle. Suddenly a realization settled over me. The second person might not be a stranger at all. It might be someone from our own family. Someone who had been present at the wedding. Someone who had never mentioned being near the bridal suite that morning. I stared at the photograph for nearly an hour. Outside, the city lights flickered beyond the apartment windows. Inside, the room felt unusually still. For weeks I had believed I was searching for a single answer. Now I understood the truth might involve more than one person. And if that was true, the secret hidden behind my wedding day was far bigger than I had ever imagined. The next morning I woke up earlier than usual, unable to shake the image from my mind. The blurry security photograph sat open on my laptop screen beside a half-finished cup of coffee. Diane was clearly visible. The second person was not. I enlarged the image again and again, hoping some overlooked detail would suddenly reveal the truth. Instead, I found myself focusing on something else entirely. The clothing. The unidentified person was wearing a light blue jacket. At first, that detail seemed meaningless. Then a memory surfaced. During the wedding weekend, only a handful of guests had worn that color. I opened my wedding photo gallery and started scrolling. Hundreds of images passed by. Smiling relatives, friends from college, members of Ryan's family. Then I stopped. There, standing beside Diane during the rehearsal dinner, was Ryan's cousin, Nathan. He was wearing a light blue jacket nearly identical to the one in the security image. My pulse quickened. Nathan had always been close to Diane. In fact, everyone joked that he was her favorite nephew. He attended nearly every family gathering. He often helped her organize events. If Diane needed assistance with something, Nathan was usually nearby. I immediately called Lauren. Within an hour, she was sitting across from me at my kitchen table. Together, we compared photographs from the wedding weekend with the security image. Neither of us could be completely certain, but the resemblance was difficult to ignore. "What if it is him?" Lauren asked quietly. I stared at the screen. "Then we need to know why he was there." Later that afternoon, Olivia joined us. When she saw the image, her expression changed immediately. She leaned closer and studied it for several seconds. "I think that is Nathan too," she said. "And if it is, there might be something you should know." Olivia explained that several months before the wedding, Diane and Nathan had been working together on what they called a special surprise for the family. Nobody ever learned exactly what the surprise was supposed to be. Whenever someone asked about it, Diane would laugh and change the subject. At the time, nobody thought much of it. Now the memory felt different, uncomfortable, suspicious. As the conversation continued, Olivia suddenly remembered something else. A week before the wedding, she had accidentally seen Diane exchanging messages with Nathan late at night. Again, nothing alarming on its own. Families communicate all the time. Yet combined with everything else, the detail added another piece to an increasingly troubling puzzle. By evening, I decided it was time to speak with Ryan. Keeping everything from him no longer felt fair. After dinner, I showed him the security records, the photographs, and the notes I had gathered over the previous weeks. At first, he remained silent. The longer he looked, the more serious he became. Finally, he leaned back in his chair and rubbed his forehead. "I do not know what to think anymore," he admitted. Hearing those words surprised me. Ryan had defended his mother throughout the entire process. For the first time, uncertainty appeared in his voice. He was beginning to see what I had been seeing. Not proof, not certainty, but a pattern. Before going to bed, Ryan made a decision. He would call Nathan directly. No accusations, no confrontation, just a conversation. A chance to ask a few simple questions. The next afternoon, Nathan finally returned the call. Ryan put the conversation on speaker so I could listen. Everything sounded normal at first. Casual, friendly. Then Ryan asked where Nathan had been on the morning of the wedding. The line went completely silent. And that silence told me more than any answer possibly could. Nathan remained silent for so long that I thought the call had disconnected. Ryan glanced at me, then back at his phone. "Nathan?" he asked again. A faint sigh came through the speaker. "I was around," Nathan finally said. The answer sounded carefully chosen. Too careful. Ryan kept his voice calm. "Around where?" Another pause followed. "Near the venue." I watched Ryan's expression change. He was hearing it too. The hesitation, the missing details, the reluctance to answer a simple question. Nathan had always been talkative, open, easygoing. This version of him sounded completely different. For the next several minutes, Ryan asked ordinary questions about the wedding morning. Each answer felt incomplete. Nathan admitted he had spoken with Diane several times that day. He admitted they had met before the ceremony. He admitted he had entered areas of the venue that guests normally did not use. Yet whenever the conversation approached the bridal suite, his responses became vague. Eventually, the call ended without any clear explanation. The moment Ryan lowered the phone, neither of us spoke. We simply looked at each other. For weeks we had been collecting fragments. Now one of those fragments had started moving on its own. 2 days later, another unexpected development arrived. Lauren called shortly after lunch. Her voice carried a mixture of excitement and disbelief. The venue coordinator had agreed to meet with us in person. Apparently, after hearing about the concerns surrounding the damaged dress, she had reviewed her own records more carefully. That evening, the three of us met in her office near the event center. She greeted us politely and placed a small stack of printed documents on the desk. "I cannot provide anything confidential," she explained, "but I can tell you what I personally observed." She began describing the wedding morning in detail. Deliveries, vendor arrivals, schedule adjustments. Then she mentioned something that immediately captured my attention. According to her memory, Diane seemed unusually focused on my dress, not in a normal mother of the groom way. Several times she had asked whether the gown had arrived safely, whether it was hanging in the correct room, whether anyone had checked on it recently. At the time, the coordinator thought Diane was simply being helpful. Looking back, however, she admitted the questions now seemed unusual. Then she opened a folder and removed a printed email. My heart skipped. The message had been sent 3 weeks before the wedding. Diane had requested confirmation that the bridal suite would remain unlocked during portions of the morning to allow family members access if needed. The coordinator approved the request because it appeared harmless. Sitting there, holding that paper in my hands, I felt something shift inside me. For the first time, the timeline began fitting together. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough to reveal intention, enough to suggest planning. After the meeting ended, Ryan remained unusually quiet during the drive home. Streetlights reflected across the windshield as we traveled through the city. Finally, he spoke. "There is something I never told you." I turned toward him. His eyes stayed fixed on the road. About 6 months before the wedding, my mother asked if I was absolutely sure about getting married. I waited. At the time, I thought she was just being protective. His grip tightened slightly on the steering wheel. Now I am not so sure. As we pulled into our apartment complex, another message appeared on my phone. It came from Olivia. Attached was a screenshot of an old email conversation she had just discovered. The sender's name made my stomach drop. Diane. The recipient was someone I never expected, and the date was only 10 days before my wedding. The moment I opened Olivia's attachment, I felt my pulse quicken. The email was brief, but every line carried weight. Diane had written to Ryan's former girlfriend, Amanda, just 10 days before the wedding. The message appeared friendly on the surface. She asked how Amanda had been doing and mentioned that the family often thought about her. Yet the deeper I read, the more uncomfortable I became. Diane went on to describe Ryan as someone who was facing a major life decision and suggested that people sometimes rushed into commitments before realizing what they truly wanted. Nothing in the email openly attacked me. Nothing directly encouraged interference. That was what made it so revealing. Diane never operated directly. She planted ideas, created doubts, opened doors, and allowed other people to walk through them. I immediately forwarded the email to Lauren and Olivia. Within minutes, both responded with the same reaction. They could not believe it. Ryan sat beside me on the couch reading the message over and over again. The disappointment on his face hurt more than anger ever could. For weeks he had been trying to find an innocent explanation for everything. Now those explanations were running out. "I never knew this existed," he said quietly. I believed him. The sadness in his voice was genuine. The following afternoon, Olivia uncovered something even more surprising. While searching through old family records, she found additional email exchanges between Diane and Amanda spanning several months. The messages were infrequent, but a pattern emerged. Diane repeatedly asked questions about Amanda's life, her career, and whether she was seeing anyone. In one exchange, Diane even mentioned that she sometimes missed the years when Amanda attended family holidays. Reading those words felt surreal. Diane had spent years smiling at me across dinner tables while quietly maintaining contact with someone from Ryan's past. That evening, Ryan finally agreed that we needed to stop gathering information privately. The evidence had reached a point where too many people were involved. Too many questions remained unanswered. We decided to invite close family members to a meeting the following weekend. Not a confrontation, not an ambush, simply an opportunity to place the facts on the table and allow everyone to see the same picture we were seeing. Word spread quickly. Olivia agreed to attend. Lauren organized the timeline we had assembled. Even Nathan unexpectedly agreed to come after Ryan told him the family deserved honesty. His willingness surprised me. It also made me nervous. People usually avoid difficult conversations when they have something to hide. During the days leading up to the meeting, Diane remained completely unaware of what was happening. She continued calling Ryan as usual. She discussed weekend plans, asked about work, talked about future holidays. Listening to those conversations felt strange now. Every cheerful word seemed disconnected from the growing mountain of evidence sitting in a folder on our dining room table. By Friday night, everything was ready. Photographs, access logs, emails, witness accounts, notes from the venue coordinator. None of the pieces alone proved everything. Together, however, they painted a story that could no longer be ignored. As I placed the final document into the folder, Ryan looked at me across the table. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. We both understood that the next day might change our family forever. Then my phone vibrated. A new message appeared from Nathan. It contained only one sentence. "There is something I should have told everyone a long time ago." Saturday arrived with an unusual sense of calm. After weeks of questions, speculation, and sleepless nights, I no longer felt anxious. Whatever happened during the family meeting, the truth was finally going to be addressed. Ryan and I hosted the gathering at our apartment clubhouse. It was neutral territory, comfortable enough for conversation, yet private enough to avoid unnecessary attention. By early afternoon, everyone had arrived. Olivia sat beside me. Lauren organized the folder containing our timeline. Nathan appeared a few minutes later, looking far more nervous than I had ever seen him. Then Diane entered the room. She smiled warmly and greeted everyone as if it were an ordinary family gathering. For a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for her. She had no idea what was coming. Once everyone settled into their seats, Ryan stood and explained why we were there. His voice remained steady. He described the damage to my wedding dress, the photographs, the access records, and the questions that had emerged afterward. Nobody interrupted. The room remained silent. Then Lauren began presenting the evidence. One document at a time, one date at a time, one fact at a time. Diane's expression changed gradually. First confusion, then discomfort, then concern. When the security records appeared, she shifted in her chair. When the emails surfaced, her eyes dropped toward the table. Yet she continued insisting there was a misunderstanding. She claimed she had only been trying to help. She said every action had been motivated by concern for her family. Then Nathan cleared his throat. Every head in the room turned toward him. The nervousness I had noticed earlier returned immediately. He looked at Diane before speaking. Then he looked away. "I need to tell everyone something," he said quietly. The room fell completely silent. Nathan explained that Diane had asked for his help several times during the months leading up to the wedding. At first, the request seemed harmless. She wanted updates about planning details. She asked questions about schedules and vendor arrangements. Eventually, however, she began expressing doubts about the marriage itself. According to Nathan, Diane repeatedly said she believed Ryan was making a mistake. She worried that once he married me, she would lose her influence in his life. Hearing those words spoken aloud felt surreal. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nathan continued. He admitted being with Diane near the bridal suite on the morning of the wedding. He admitted helping her access certain areas of the venue. However, he insisted he never knew anything would happen to the dress. He believed she simply wanted to look at it. The disappointment on his face appeared genuine. For several seconds, Diane said nothing. Then, something unexpected happened. She stopped denying everything. She did not confess to damaging the dress. She did not offer a dramatic explanation. Instead, she quietly admitted that she had spent years trying to influence Ryan's choices. She believed she knew what was best for him. She believed she was protecting him. Somewhere along the way, that belief had grown into control. The room remained silent as the reality settled over everyone. Ryan looked heartbroken, but also strangely relieved. The uncertainty was finally over. For weeks we had been chasing fragments. Now we understood the larger truth. This was never really about a dress. It was about boundaries, trust, respect. It was about a mother who could not accept that her son had built a life of his own. In the months that followed, many things changed. Conversations became more honest. Relationships became healthier. Ryan and I focused on our marriage instead of the conflict surrounding it. The damaged dress was eventually repaired and carefully stored away. Yet whenever I see it now, I think about something very different. Not the disappointment of that wedding morning, but the lesson that followed. Sometimes the strongest thing a family can do is stop pretending everything is fine and finally face the truth.